Thanks for joining us, everybody. My name's Patti Hagen, and I'm the president and director of T-Rex. And we are lucky to have one of my very good friends, Chris Ho, who we work with quite a bit, actually, and go to hockey games with even occasionally, as our guest today. The purpose of this discussion or this series has been to focus on entrepreneurs' journeys in with their efforts, and in their efforts along the lines of innovation, along the lines of creating their companies, what that experience has been like, what they see for the future. So it's got a little bit of personal information as well as business information mixed in. And we've had some great conversations so far, and I'm really looking forward to talking with Chris today as well. So Chris, welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's exciting.
Yeah. So I should say Dr. Chris Ho, because Chris is both MD, PhD, and so that's quite a bit of a journey in itself. Chris, can you give us a little bit of your background, your educational background, and what made you sort of go in the direction in terms of your education, and where that's sort of led up to the company?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in West Lafayette, Indiana, which is where Purdue is, and I got my degree, my BS degree at Purdue. Fortunately, I've been lucky. I had my choice of medical schools to go to. I wanted to be a doctor. To be honest, I came here to WashU because they paid for it all. So it's like, okay, I'm going to St. Louis. At the time, I was a big Cubs fan because I didn't know any better. I have since obviously seen the light, and it's much brighter. And so, I've been in St. Louis since 1987. This is when I started medical school here. So as Patti said, I have an MD and a PhD. My PhD is in pharmacology, but technically I'm a computational biophysicist. Okay. So how I came about starting my company. So my PhD was in developing algorithms to use computers to help design drugs cheaper, better, faster. Okay. And when I was in medical school, it was a very, very scary time because that was when HIV was rampant. Okay. The AIDS virus was basically killing people. If you got it, it was a death sentence. And being not even an intern, you're doing a blood draw, and it's nerve-wracking because you have no idea. One slip up and you basically have a fatal illness. But fast forward a couple of years, I always ask people, name someone you know personally that has died of AIDS, and invariably it's zero. Literally, it's zero. So thanks to the miracles of modern pharmaceutical science, we basically wiped out a disease that was so dangerous and fearsome. HIV protease inhibitors, which is the mainstay of the treatment, is one of the first and probably most successful success stories of computational drug design. In other words, using computer modeling to actually develop compounds that then go through clinical trials and become medicines. The initial ones were discovered all in the computer, and in the lab that I was doing my PhD in, we were integral a part of that. I mean, it is a huge army of people who are developing these compounds, and so I realized then and there, this has such high promise. I have to get in on this. I have to do this. It's my passion for the rest of my life. And keep in mind, back then, I mean, your phone probably has an order of magnitude more power than the computer that I got my thesis on. And so literally, we knew what was possible, but we didn't have the power to do it. Even now, I mean, anything that I developed back then, completely obsolete until literally about 7 years ago, because that's when the first GPUs, the graphical cards that everyone plays games on, or nowadays everyone mines their cryptocurrency That's what we used to do all our calculations. You know, we left the computer long ago. All the calculations are actually on that graphics card because it's literally orders and orders of magnitude more power. So that's what got me started. The realization that computer modeling could make a huge difference to medical science and the world. I always say, if you're trying to start a business and you're in a pharmaceutical or a biological science, you really want to help people because there are far easier ways to make money. Biology and everything, that it's just a very messy science because you're dealing with humans, human bodies. And so it's been a long slog, but it's been very, very rewarding because you can see the impact. I mean, just look at what vaccines have hopefully will transform how we were a year ago today, right? We go from lockdown and from everyone fearful for their lives to hopefully a rather normal existence in hopefully a few short months. Okay, so that's how I got started. That's what kicked off. What actually was the critical catalyst was when I graduated from medical school, got my PhD. I was ready to hit the clinics. I was going to be a radiologist. But then unfortunately, my father was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. And so, you know, the good son, I'm the eldest, I did not know what I wanted to do, whether or not I wanted to continue my PhD work in a company or to go be a radiologist or do both. And so I literally took 3 years out of my life to take care of him until he died. But during this time, I realized I should be designing drugs as opposed to prescribing them. And that kind of solidified my career path since. And it's been fun. Like I said, if you're talking business terms, I go by the route of licensing. I develop technology, I license it to a publisher and get royalties. That's how I do it because it's a lot easier. Back then, we didn't have the computational power we have now. Whereas nowadays, because of the democratization of computing power, right, through Amazon, through Google, through Microsoft, if you need 1,000 computers, obviously it's going to cost money, but you can get 1,000 computers like that. And so, you know, it makes sense now. You can literally drive off on your own and do it. Back then, licensing was probably the only way to go about making a big dent and still being a business. So that's what I did.
Yeah. Well, Chris, you know, it's interesting. You're in terms of your education, how did you develop the technology chops during your MD PhD work? Because that probably was not part of your program, right? Was that something that you took on yourself?
Yeah.
Was that self-taught? Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. I was a nerd like everyone else in my cohort, right? You play around with computers. Granted, these computers were about the same. I mean, it's funny. Computers are always the same price, but you know, they're like orders and orders of magnitude slower. But I learned all of that on my own. I actually have never taken a computer class ever. I mean, so it's a testament to, if you want to learn something, you can learn something and get really, really good at it. I have been fortunate. I have been around professional coders who kind of set me straight, because if you get into bad habits as a coder, that's not good. You can make a mess very quickly. As my dad would always say, you know, computers are high-speed idiots. And so if you don't get things right, you just make crap faster. And that's absolutely true, especially in the machine learning era. Anyways, besides that, so yeah, that's basically how I got started. When I came to WashU, Washington University is, I've seen other medical institutions, they are fabulous in terms of interdisciplinary stuff. I mean, my first rotations were in radiological sciences. They weren't in the biological sciences, because I wanted to do something with computers, graphics, and medicine. So radiology at the time was the way to go. But I learned really early that most of the breakthroughs in radiology were coming from the hardware side, not the software side. So I switched to the next best thing, which was, hey, let's use computers to design drugs, because we can visualize them. We have these cool 3D visualization techniques. We can literally dock them in. You're like playing Tetris, except you're building molecules on the fly. It's not that simple, but you get the idea. But it kind of is. You're trying to build a key to fit a lock. And that was just that was just super sexy. I said, I have to do this. And that's basically what got me started.
So Chris, in terms of developing those technology chops and then getting the advancements in technology so that you can do the work that you're doing now, one of the things that I found so interesting in learning from you about the advancements in these graphical interfaces, the gaming, basically that was built for gaming technology, or gaming purposes, that now has so many uses in other ways, and especially with what you're doing. I mean, can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, the computational explosion has been amazing, especially with the advent of graphics cards. Okay, so everyone has probably heard of Moore's law, and thanks to graphics cards, it continues. It'll be interesting to see where we go from here, because heat is becoming a big issue, heat and power. But in terms of, again, when we developed these algorithms, we were and still are developing algorithms for computational power that hasn't been invented yet. We were just hoping, you know, in our lifetimes, let's hope the computers catch up, and it's been beyond what people have thought. Okay, but you always want more. I'm sure when we're in Star Trek times, if we make it that far, we'll still be like, you know, if we just had twice the computing power, we could do so much more. But no, it's not only has the computational power increased, but as I said, the democratization of it. Anyone can take a Udemy class on machine learning and get pretty good at it. And then if you need to train a model, yes, it does cost money and it's expensive, but the computing resources are out there. Unfortunately, no one can buy a graphics card now because of chip shortages and that stupid cryptocurrency that everyone's trying to do, but that's a different matter. But if you need computing power, you can rent it from any of the three big providers. And so that's literally allowed research to explode. The other thing I will say is projects like Folding at Home, which is actually based here in St. Louis. It's in the laboratory of Greg Bowman, who I've worked with in the past. It's kind of the opposite. We can solve humongous problems when all of us band together. And Folding at Home is one of these where if you've got a gaming box with a powerful GPU, you can set aside certain hours of the day where a very important scientific problem will be basically doled out to you, a small fraction of it, and you will work on that and send the results back. So during the pandemic, the amount of computing power that system had literally is just through the roof. Teraflops of computing power were established. And so a lot of that was work. They did a lot of work on simulating the COVID proteins, the surface proteins, the spike proteins. And that literally has allowed us to create these vaccines. Okay. And so it works both ways. Not only is it democratizing, but also thanks to everyone having this power, we can harness the collective, if you will, to solve enormous problems.
You know, that's the first time I've heard of that phrase, Chris, folding at home. So can I ask you a little bit more about that? I'm really interested.
So in order to solve some of these things, when you are trying to develop something like a vaccine or a small molecule drug, you have to know, I'm just going to use the old school analogy of a lock and a key. You're building keys to fit a lock, or it's different for vaccines. You're basically developing an antibody to latch onto a protein. But the key thing is you really have to know what is the behavior of your target, okay? And we can only simulate things in finite discrete time steps on the order of nanoseconds. And to really characterize what these targets are doing, it takes sometimes on the realm of milliseconds. So you can imagine that is 6-10 orders of magnitude longer than we can simulate by ourselves. So in order to solve these problems, we need a lot of computing power, more than you could ever buy in a single entity. And so that's what folding at home. There are other things. There's the SETI project, where basically we're looking for ET, right? Where you have these enormous problem sets and they just get doled out into thousands, hundreds of thousands of little discrete packets, which then get sent to you or I. And our machine will solve this one little piece of that problem and send the results back, and then they're compiled. So again, it's the brute force. We have all this computing power. Let's harness it for good.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's fun to play Call of Duty or whatever, but we could really use that power to again do things like create vaccines against pandemics. And so it's just super exciting to be able to use that much power.
It's Chris, it sort of reminds me of I used to work in the environmental field, and we had a lot of citizen science projects where for example, you can't count all the birds in the sky, but you can get a good sense of populations if you bring together a great number of people who are counting birds or insects or any other kind of natural being, where they're at, and then make some assumptions moving forward. So it's almost like citizen science, isn't it, in a way, when citizens can contribute, but they're contributing the power of their machines, right?
That's exactly correct. I mean, again, it's everyone contributes in one way or the other. I mean, the example I always use also is like Weather Underground, Wonderground. If you use that weather site, I mean, all that data is coming from people like you and I. You have a little thing that you buy that just sets up in your backyard. It records barometric pressure and whatever, humidity, precipitation, and just sends it to a central server. So again, you're harnessing the collective in order to get a ginormous data set that no one entity could get on their own.
That's really cool. Tyler just was asking about, he didn't know that Folding at Home was based in St. Louis. And so where does St. Louis rank in terms of health tech medicine nationally or even globally?
Oh, very high. I mean, we have a lot of, St. Louis is a very cool place to be in terms of technology, because, it's been well documented how we are very, what's the word I'm looking for? Efficient in small businesses because the cost of living is cheap here. We have very smart people here. And if you have very smart people who know what they need and it costs little to do things, it becomes like a catalyst for huge growth, right? So it's an exciting place to be, especially in the sciences. A lot, obviously the Ivy League, they are very also highly respected and have their own big machine in terms of scientific output, but we hold our own by all means. So we had multiple COVID tests that were developed here. The big spit test was developed in a lab of one of my colleagues. So, the innovation here is tremendous.
Yeah. So Chris, I want to kind of get back to your to drug design methodologies and how you're using technology to really innovate around the design of drugs. So without, obviously we don't want to get into any intellectual property issues, but in theory, there's the opportunity to look at, for example, like a DNA strand and be able to visualize how a specific drug could affect the DNA of the individual. Is that a proper way to talk about that?
Yeah, in general, as I said, how I characterized it before, you are trying to build a key to fit a lock, and that's classic drug design, small molecules. Again, biologics are different. They are antibodies, which are, I think of them as big tweezers, which latch on to like a spike protein and neutralize it. But it's the same idea. You're trying to build something to interact with another target, and you are trying to optimize those interactions, okay? You're trying to make a tighter binding drug. But the hard part, it's actually very easy develop a key that binds a lock very tightly. It's easy to design a drug that binds its target very tightly. The hard part is you have all these other variables that you have to deal with. Most importantly, you don't want to kill the patient. So you have to be careful with side effects. You have to be careful with other effects. You know, I think people don't realize how hard drug discovery is. You know, after you've spent your couple $100 million and actually gotten a clinical lead that goes into clinical trials, like everyone pops the champagne and says, we made it to clinical trials. Right then and there, you have a 1 in 24 chance of making it to market. That's, you know, astoundingly horrible odds. And that's why I say, you know, if you're a startup and you're working on drug discovery, it is a difficult task. And so, but conversely, because it is so soul-crushingly difficult, any little bit of signal that you can provide to a pharmaceutical company, an academic institution, a pipeline that people use to develop these things, any little bit helps. You know, I would argue that machine learning has been a huge boon. One of the biggest breakthroughs, like there are these challenges in science that have always been there that people have kind of shot for. And one of them that was just marked off the list was folding proteins. So Google's folding, shoot, I am mental blocking on the name of the program. But anyways, Google pretty much with their machine learning chops, at least the standardized tests that everyone takes a shot at. There are these competitions where they hand out a sequence and you fold it. You use whatever modeling technique you want. You create what you think is the 3D shape of it, and you submit it back because no one knows what the answer is except for the people who sponsor the contest. Well, Google pretty much just nailed it, like really nailed it. So that's an age-old problem I never thought would have been solved in my lifetime. But Google spent $1.5 billion on that last year, on just that problem. I personally don't have that just lying around. So, I mean, these problems are immense. But as you can see, with new technologies and new ways of attacking a problem, they're being solved. The next frontier, I think, is quantum computing. You know, I think that's part of. I work with a French team that works with quantum computing. That's another one of my side things that I work on. It might be my lifetime. It may not be. Probably won't be. But when quantum computers hit, that's the next huge leap where totally intractable problems will be solved in milliseconds. Right. That's why I tell people, those of you who want crypto, who are doing crypto, you've got like a limited time because once quantum computing's hit, that crypto part goes bye-bye. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens then, because that's the two big things people are working on with quantum computers. Number one, quantum mechanics. Number two, factoring keys for figuring out passwords. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see when that technology, you think something's going to happen here, and it just happens so much sooner than you think now. And so it will be, I can't predict it, but it'll be cool when it happens.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot to manage. I mean, what are some of the ethical concerns that you see with the speed of technology? We love all of us love technology. I wouldn't be doing my job, you wouldn't be doing your job but sometimes I feel like the technology is almost passing up our ability to sort of sort through the best ways to manage it or to be human together in a community. What do you think about the speed of technology and our ability to manage those concerns?
Yeah, I mean, faster machines are awesome, but again, for machine learning, for example, everything is tied to how good your data is, right? Because again, the make crap faster problem is absolutely paramount, especially in machine learning, because that's what has gotten so powerful is the GPU, the graphical processing that's gotten really much faster. Disk space has gotten incredibly cheap. I mean, I still remember when I started the lab, we bought like a 2 megabyte hard drive for, I don't know, $5,000. Right now it's you're 5 orders of magnitude past that. And bandwidth is cheap. But again, if you're using crappy data, I think that's a big problem nowadays with machine learning and other things that, so this is answering a small part of what you asked.
Sure.
You have to be very cognizant because the machines have gotten so much faster. You can think, oh, I've solved this problem, and you have to be very careful in the data you feed to it and how you interpret the results. Okay. The other thing is you get reliant on it. So for example, self-driving cars. Yeah, I think that's super powerful. It would definitely have its place in assisting. So the algorithms I've always developed, okay, even through drug discovery or other things, I work in augmented reality. I do all kinds of cool stuff, but regardless, my philosophy has always been, I'm going to develop something that helps the human think faster or think better or remove noise and allow the person to concentrate better on the signal. Because, self-driving cars, we've seen if you rely on them too much, they can kill you because there is always something comes up, that you never anticipated. And unfortunately, in a car that's moving very fast, that could be fatal. And so relying on them is potentially going to be a problem. I still think, I think the benefits outweigh them because, again, like for example, tumor detection in radiology, small plain film radiology, the computer can do it instantly and be almost as accurate as a human can. But, I guess my point would be I'd want the algorithm to flag the really problematic things and have the human look at it, whereas the mundane things, it should just take care of it, right? So you use them, but you don't rely on them 100%. You always have a backup.
Yeah. Chris, lately I've been wondering, and it's because we've been, actually you've taught me a lot about extended reality. I use the word extended reality to sort of an umbrella term for augmented and virtual reality. And I know you have been dipping your toes into that quite a bit, more than your toes. You're doing work in extended reality. I've been wondering though, I've been sort of envisioning a future where our interactions with our machines, including the way that we are working now, we may have choices in being with our machines completely virtually, or in sort of a 2D kind of environment like we are right now. I don't know. What are your thoughts about what you see in terms of the way that extended reality is going to impact kind of the average citizen or the way that we work into the future?
Sure. My big fear is that we'll get spammed everywhere. Enough spam email here and there, but it'll be augmented now. No, seriously, we're already doing that. If you look at your cars, right? How many cars have heads-up displays, which are actually pretty informative? Again, my philosophy is whatever fancy electronic doodad you're using, it should actually help your everyday life as opposed to being a distraction. Okay. You're absolutely right in that. How much do we complain that literally we spend 90% of our lives buried in our phones or looking at a screen? And that's a sociology question, and that has merits because computers are just going to continually to get faster and more powerful. For extended reality, though, I see a lot of the cool applications, and obviously I've been working on some of them myself. The big interesting thing is when these get developed, augmented reality glasses, because right now you still have to hold your phone up to something. Yes, I bought a couch from IKEA, but I got to do this. And so, yeah, you don't want to be looking through your phone everywhere because it's kind of dangerous. But if glasses, it's not a question of if. When glasses become mainstream, right? Smart watches were kind of like a fad 10 years ago. Now pretty much everyone has them. Same deal. That's when hopefully we see a lot of the benefits. If you need directions, they're just there. But again, I think you are absolutely right. It's important to display this information in a way that's helpful and doesn't distract us from, or cause us to have accidents or something like that.
Yeah. So Chris, let's go back to the business, to your entrepreneurial journey. So when you decided to, after your dad passed away and you were forming, your plans for the future, and you knew that this was a direction that you wanted to go in terms of designing drugs and using technology to be able to do a better job of that. How did you decide then, I need to do this myself? I want to be in charge of my own destiny, and how did you move forward with that?
Yeah, great question. I mean, to be honest, at the time, I worked for probably one of the tops in the fields. And so we knew our stuff was tops in the fields. So I said, well, I might as well make a run at it, because no one else is going to do, if someone else is going to do it, it's going to do it worse than we do. And so I said, I'm going to go for it. I did, as I said, my business model was licensing, because I did not have the time to both raise money, deal with the technology, deal with marketing, deal with all the things that that go into running a successful business. So I knew my limitations. As a scientist, you're kind of very used to the stereotypical, I'm just going to hold myself in my lab and figure out these problems. And so that's the choice I made because what I do is develop technology, and I super enjoy that. And the rest of the stuff is fun, but I also do business development. But in science, it's different. You have to have a bullet, something has to be fairly bulletproof in science, because if it's not, you're going to kill people. And so that's why I overstress maybe the R&D scientific development part in my career. So to answer your question, A, I knew we had the best technology, and B, I had a great partner, because I work with a company called Tripos, which has been bought and sold a couple times now. It's now called Certara. It was based here in St. Louis. Had a great working relationship with them, and I knew all the scientists and the developers. And so it was an easy choice for me, the way I went about bringing my technology to market. Nowadays, because of as I said, the democratization of power, computing power, you can pretty much do a lot of that on your own. You raise some money, you can at least hire enough people, smart people, and you have the computing resources to do everything. That was the other thing. Back 20, 30 years ago, we didn't have the power. I couldn't just go, hey, I'm going to do all the calculations on my little server farm in my office. That was impossible. We didn't have an Amazon either. So you had to partner with a pharmaceutical company, or, and so it was more laid out for me than, I can't really take credit for it. It was the path of not only least resistance, but I just sort of had to do it that way. Otherwise, it wouldn't have made it to market.
But you could have chosen to go work for a pharmaceutical company, but you knew that you had you had this belief in yourself and what you could bring to the problem. This is what I'm interpreting.
Gotcha.
And that you wanted to move forward with that belief in yourself and what you could bring to the problem, and be in charge of your own destiny in that way. Is that a correct interpretation?
Yes. So to clarify that, I chose to go with a publisher, because then everyone would benefit. Okay. You don't make nearly as much money as a publisher, because they take the lion's share, and they're doing their part. I mean, they're doing all the support. I don't have to answer, why is it not booting up? I don't have to answer the dumb questions. Not all questions are dumb, but a lot of them are. So they do their part. They did all the support. They did all the documentation. But, I definitely gave up my share of the revenue for that. But on the flip side, my technology was licensed by 40 at its tops, 40 of the largest pharmaceutical firms in the world. So everyone got to benefit from it. You know, had I gone with a pharmaceutical company, it would be their sole property, right? Because I basically sign over your life when you take a paycheck. So that was another choice I made in that, yeah, I'm going to do it this way. It's going to probably give up some of the give up a lot more money than normal, but that was the primary path that I chose, because when you do this, it boils down to what you enjoy. I enjoy developing technology, seeing things, envisioning something working and figuring out how to make that happen. That's what gets me up in the morning. The rest of the stuff, not so much. So, it is what it is. So that's how I chose my path.
Well, I love that part of your choice was the benefit to humanity. Frankly, you wanted to have that technology more broadly available to the world. So that's awesome, Chris. So
Thanks.
Thank you. That's very noble. So Chris, what are the biggest challenges that you have in being an entrepreneur and running the company and moving it forward and staying on top of everything? It's a lot.
Yeah, you could argue that the challenges are things like machine learning have brought in their own challenges as well, because it's hard to separate from everyone else, because, and it's good. The internet has made learning much more accessible, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
That should be that way. Problem is, you also get a lot of crap when people are developing these things. Everyone thinks, hey, my solution's better. And so if you go online, you look up various machine learning models, there's not much quality control there. And you can get in real trouble just borrowing stuff off the internet and not knowing exactly what it's doing. So that's one of the challenges, is basically, and maybe this is more from someone who's evaluating talent and the efficacy of a program or a pipeline, is knowing what is real and real signal, what's giving you good results and what's not good results. Just because there's, pretty much everyone can do this now or try to do this. There's a fine line. The biggest thing I find is that domain expertise is still king, okay? Because you can have the smartest coders in the world, but if they don't know what's good data and what's bad data, like in drug discovery, if you don't know whether or not your compound is actually really binding well, or if it just appears to be, it's a red herring, you can get in big trouble. So domain expertise, you still have to know what the ins and outs of your field, like bulletproof, in order to, and so technology is like a force multiplier. You can either be super awesome or super crappy, and it's important to know the distinction. That's by far the biggest challenge. Yeah, again, building models in any way, not only machine learning, you just have to have good data, and getting good data is key.
So Chris, it sounds like this has come up a couple times in our conversation today, so there's a project I'm working on right now as well that there's a great need to make sure that the data is strong and quality data, because that's, obviously, what decisions need to be made on. But how do you get to the root of knowing whether a data set is strong or not? Is it our quality? I mean, is it almost like a resume that you're looking, and now I know we're talking in different fields, because I'm talking in terms of a social project that I'm involved in, but in terms of your work, do you look for a data set, or do you have data sets that you then need to almost look at a resume of the investigators, or how do you make sure that the data sets that you're working with are the quality that you need in order to move forward?
Yeah, good question. I would say a lot of the data sets we use are things that pharmaceutical companies have released, okay, or large, well-established firms that do this sort of thing. you know, science is very democratic, and so people have released a lot of their work. And this is something I always drive home. The reason why science is awesome is that anyone can validate something, right? You don't have to take anything on gospel. If someone says the sky is blue, you can go look yourself and verify their observations, and more importantly, the hypothesis that they drew from these observations. So, you know, that's, again, I go back to the domain expertise. Maybe a better analogy would be your whatever your social thing. Like when you get data sources, were they extracted from by someone who knows what they're doing? What's their claim to the field? You know, was that data set especially designed to solve that particular problem, or is it like pulled from another data set that may be indirect, right? Because the point is how much noise is in it. So for me, I'm always look at A, who created the data sets, okay? B, what are the conditions under which they were collected, right? Were they all collected under same conditions? Pharmaceutical sciences, that's the problem. You have all these different assays. That's what we use to verify. That's like ground truthing. An assay is what tells you how well something binds to another. But there are all these different conditions. And if you're not careful, you're pulling data and kind of like mixing them all together, but they're under all different conditions, different pHs, different salt concentrations. I'm throwing out pharmaceutical terms, but you can get the idea. You have to make sure that they're collected under the same set of observations. You collect something on a rainy day. Is it different than a sunny day, right? Probably is. So those are the kinds of things. Or when was it collected, right? The temporal relationships. Is it collected in the wintertime versus the summertime? So those are the self-consistent things you're always looking for, regardless of what problem you're trying to solve or what data source you're getting, to make sure it's under a consistent manner that's well documented. That's the third big beast, documentation. You know, if it's well documented, at least you can read what they did and judge for yourself. But sometimes you download a data set from the internet, it's like, oh, hodgepodge of data. I have no idea where it came from. Looks good, but is it, right? So those are the kinds of questions that you are constantly trying to solve or optimize, because again, your computers are so fast. Yes, they can process it, but should they, right? Or should you be answering this question with this data?
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, in our current times, these different ways of looking at what the truth is, and finding your own facts and so forth.
Oh yeah.
Could that be extrapolated into even data sets? I'm sure that exists, that happens, which makes it pretty worrisome. But hopefully that doesn't hit. Well, I guess it could. It could actually hit to. It could actually hit biology and pharmacological research if people were messing with data sets, I guess. Have you ever seen anything like that?
Well, I mean, Theranos, right? The big Elizabeth Holmes, basically just lying her way to $1 billion company,
yes.
right? So yeah, it's important, because you have, when money meets science, right? I mean, usually money wins, and so you have to be careful. That's that's true in any industry, though, to be honest. Medicine is just a little more direct, because you're taking something that either saves your life or potentially kills you. But it's throughout society we have that issue.
Yeah. Humans can't live with them, can't live without them.
Well, my boss would always say, science is so awesome. Unfortunately, it's done by humans, right?
I love talking science with you, Chris Ho. You're awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks for being a good friend, and thanks for being with us today too. And thanks to the group for being with us too. So, so everybody's saying thanks to you, Chris. You're awesome.
It's you, Patti. It's all you.
Oh. That's so. All right, my friends. Well, thank you. Have a good day. Enjoy the evening. Looks kind of pretty out there. Hope you get a chance to be outside for a while. See you guys.